What if I told you there's a place on Earth so vast that you could drive for 2,000 miles and encounter virtually no human habitation? A landscape so extreme that temperatures swing from a scorching 50 degrees Celsius in summer to a bone-chilling minus 7.5 degrees Celsius in winter. Welcome to the Australian Outback, a realm that covers over 70% of an entire continent, yet houses fewer people than the city of Denver. But here's the mystery box I want you to keep in mind as we journey through this incredible landscape. How does a region this harsh and isolated not only sustain life, but actually generate nearly half of Australia's export revenue? The answer will surprise you, and it involves a fascinating fusion of 65,000-year-old wisdom and cutting-edge modern technology. Let's start with something that's almost impossible to comprehend: the sheer scale of the Australian Outback. We're talking about 5.5 million square kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the entire European Union. It's bigger than India and Pakistan combined. Yet this massive expanse is home to just 607,000 people. That's fewer inhabitants than the city of Milwaukee, spread across an area the size of Alaska and Texas put together. But why does this matter? Because in the Outback, scale isn't just a statistic. It's a force that shapes everything. Every aspect of life, from how ecosystems function to how communities survive, is fundamentally altered by this vastness. This immense scale has created something remarkable: some of the world's largest intact natural landscapes. We're talking about ecosystems that range from the scorching Great Victoria Desert to tropical savannas in the north, each harboring species that have evolved in splendid isolation for millions of years. Picture this: ancient McDonnell Ranges rising from desert floors, ephemeral lake systems that can transform overnight from barren salt flats into vast wetlands when the rains come. It's a landscape of extremes that would seem hostile to life, yet it pulses with biodiversity that exists nowhere else on Earth. Now let's talk about the Outback's climate. And trust me, calling it extreme is an understatement. We've already mentioned those temperature swings from 50 degrees Celsius to minus 7.5 degrees Celsius. But the real story is in the rainfall patterns. Some years bring devastating droughts that stretch for months, while others unleash flooding that transforms arid deserts into temporary wetland networks. But here's what's fascinating: this isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Desert ecosystems have evolved to capitalize on this unpredictability. Plants and animals have developed what scientists call boom and bust adaptations. They can survive the lean times and explode into activity when conditions are right. Think about the bilby, a small rabbit-eared marsupial that's become a keystone species in this harsh environment. These remarkable creatures don't just survive in the Outback. Their burrows support 45 different species. That's right. One animal's home becomes an apartment complex for dozens of others. But here's the concerning part: as bilby populations decline, entire ecological networks are at risk of collapse. This brings us to our first mystery box reveal. The Outback isn't just surviving despite its extremes, it's thriving because of them. The very conditions that seem hostile have created one of the most resilient and interconnected ecosystems on the planet. Let me paint you a picture of isolation in the Outback. Some communities are hundreds of kilometers from the nearest services. We're talking about places where the closest hospital might be a 3-hour flight away, where internet connectivity is still a luxury, and where running out of fuel doesn't mean calling a tow truck. It means potentially life-threatening situations. Yet here's the paradox: this same isolation has become a protective shield. It has preserved cultural practices and ecological processes that would have been disrupted anywhere else on Earth. Traditional knowledge systems have survived intact, Species have evolved without external interference, and communities have developed self-reliance that would put survival experts to shame. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of outback isolation is how communication works. Ever heard of the bush telegraph? It's both an ancient communication network and a modern phenomenon. Information can traverse enormous distances through social networks faster than you might think possible. Today, this combines traditional knowledge sharing with satellite communications and digital platforms. Here's where things get really interesting, and this addresses our earlier mystery box. How does such a sparsely populated region generate nearly half of Australia's export revenue? The answer lies in the outback's incredible mineral wealth and agricultural productivity. We're talking about more than 40,000 small and medium enterprises operating in this vast landscape. Mining operations extract everything from iron ore to rare earth minerals. Pastoral stations manage cattle and sheep across properties that can be larger than small countries. Yet here's the cruel irony. Much of this wealth flows to urban centers, leaving outback communities economically vulnerable. Let me give you a stark example of this economic paradox. In some remote outback communities, families spend 34 to 80% of their household income just to purchase healthy food. Compare that to the average Australian family, which spends about 14%. Geographic isolation increases costs throughout supply chains, and limited competition in remote stores enables what can only be described as monopolistic pricing. But there's hope in this story, and it comes from an unexpected source. Here's where our story takes a remarkable turn. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have maintained continuous occupation of outback regions for over 65,000 years. That's longer than modern humans have existed anywhere else outside of Africa. During this time, they've developed knowledge systems so sophisticated that modern science is only beginning to understand their complexity. This isn't just cultural heritage we're talking about. It's ecological infrastructure. These knowledge systems encompass understanding of seasonal cycles, species behaviors, water sources, and sustainable resource extraction methods that have been tested and refined over millennia. Let me tell you about one of the most successful examples of integrating traditional knowledge with modern innovation: fire management. Traditional Aboriginal burning practices create what scientists call landscape mosaics, carefully planned patchworks of burned and unburned areas that support biodiversity while reducing wildfire risk. Here's the scale we're talking about. Traditional burning programs in Western Australia's North Kimberley have measurably improved fire management outcomes across 11.7 million hectares. That's an area larger than South Korea, managed using techniques that predate agriculture itself. This brings us to one of the most successful modern applications of traditional knowledge: Indigenous ranger programs. These initiatives now employ over 2,000 people in land management roles that combine cultural obligations with environmental outcomes. But the benefits go far beyond employment. Studies show these programs generate significant social returns on investment, including reduced incarceration rates and improved community health. And here's our second mystery box reveal. The expansion of these programs to a projected 5,000 positions represents more than job creation. It's nation building. These rangers are becoming the guardians of landscapes that would otherwise face degradation from invasive species, destructive wildfires, and other threats. Now let's talk about how modern technology is revolutionizing life in the outback. Renewable energy systems, particularly solar installations with battery storage, are providing reliable power in remote locations while reducing dependence on expensive diesel generators. Advanced telecommunications enable telehealth services, distance education, and economic opportunities that were previously impossible. But perhaps the most exciting development is precision agriculture technology. Satellite monitoring and automated systems enable more efficient resource use in pastoral operations. These technologies can optimize water use, monitor vegetation conditions, and manage livestock movements to reduce environmental impacts while maintaining productivity. Here's something beautiful. Digital platforms are enabling new forms of cultural preservation and transmission. Traditional knowledge can now be documented and shared through digital media while maintaining appropriate cultural protocols. The Indigenous Mapping Workshop Australia program demonstrates this perfectly, using geospatial technologies to document and preserve traditional land-related knowledge while respecting cultural sensitivities. Here's where traditional knowledge meets contemporary environmental economics in a truly remarkable way. Australia's carbon farming initiative enables land managers to earn credits through activities including vegetation restoration, soil carbon sequestration, and improved fire management. These programs particularly benefit Indigenous communities, whose traditional land management practices often align perfectly with carbon sequestration goals. Savanna burning programs in Northern Australia demonstrate the potential scale of these opportunities. Controlled burning during the early dry season reduces greenhouse gas emissions while creating employment for Indigenous rangers and improving biodiversity outcomes. It's a win-win-win situation that shows how ancient wisdom can solve modern problems. Let's talk numbers for a moment. The Outback provides ecosystem services whose economic value is increasingly recognized. Climate regulation through carbon storage represents the most valuable service, with grasslands contributing $18.1 billion, native forests $17.8 billion, and savannas $7.1 billion to the national total. Water provisioning contributes $1.4 billion, while grazed biomass services provide $40.4 billion in value to pastoral industries. These aren't just statistics. They represent a fundamental shift in how we value natural landscapes. The provisioning of these services depends on active management and the maintenance of ecological processes that traditional practices have historically supported. But let's not paint too rosy a picture. The Outback faces unprecedented challenges. Research indicates that 19 Australian ecosystems, many within or connected to Outback regions, are already showing signs of collapse. Climate change is intensifying existing stressors while creating novel conditions that test even the most resilient adaptations. Invasive species, from feral camels to introduced grasses, are altering ecosystem processes and species relationships. Mining and infrastructure development continue to fragment habitats and alter hydrological systems. The profound reduction in active land management following colonial disruption of traditional practices has left vast areas with minimal human oversight. Climate change adaptation strategies for the Outback must account for increasing temperature extremes, changing precipitation patterns, and more frequent extreme events. Water security becomes increasingly critical, requiring investment in diverse supply sources, efficient distribution systems, and demand management. Heat resilience requires both infrastructure adaptations, better building design, cooling systems, renewable energy, and social adaptations, including seasonal migration patterns and community support systems. Here's why the Australian Outback story matters beyond Australia's borders. The strategies being developed here may provide models for similar challenges in other remote regions worldwide. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern technology, the development of sustainable economic opportunities in harsh environments, and the creation of resilient communities in the face of climate change. These are global challenges. The Outback's role in global climate regulation, biodiversity conservation, and cultural preservation makes its sustainable management a matter of international significance. This vast landscape is becoming a testing ground for approaches to sustainability in the world's remaining great natural areas. As we face an uncertain climate future, the lessons emerging from the Australian Outback become increasingly valuable. How do you maintain human communities in increasingly harsh environments? How do you preserve biodiversity while enabling economic development? How do you integrate traditional knowledge with modern technology in ways that respect both? The future of the Australian Outback lies in sophisticated integration of traditional Indigenous knowledge systems with modern technological and scientific innovations. The success of initiatives like Indigenous ranger programs, the integration of traditional fire management with contemporary conservation science, and the development of culturally appropriate economic opportunities demonstrate that this integration isn't just possible, it's essential. Digital connectivity is emerging as fundamental infrastructure for contemporary outback resilience. High-speed internet enables access to educational opportunities, telehealth services, and economic participation that geography would otherwise prevent. But this technology must be deployed thoughtfully, respecting cultural protocols and community priorities. Long-term resilience requires building adaptive capacity across multiple scales. At the community level, this involves developing diverse economic opportunities, improving access to education and training, and maintaining social networks that can respond to changing conditions. At the ecosystem level, adaptive capacity requires maintaining ecological connectivity, preserving genetic diversity, and supporting species' ability to respond to changing conditions. As we conclude this journey through the Australian Outback, let me return to that mystery box I posed at the beginning. How does a region this harsh and isolated not only sustain life, but generate enormous wealth and provide crucial ecosystem services? The answer lies in understanding that the Outback isn't just a place. It's a living laboratory for sustainable development in extreme environments. It's where 65,000-year-old wisdom meets cutting-edge technology, where ancient fire management techniques reduce modern carbon emissions, where traditional rangers use satellite imagery to protect landscapes larger than entire countries. The Australian Outback shows us that resilience isn't about fighting against harsh conditions. It's about working with them. It's about recognizing that Indigenous knowledge isn't just cultural heritage to be preserved, but practical wisdom that can solve contemporary challenges. It's about understanding that the most isolated places on Earth might hold the keys to our shared future. The stakes extend far beyond Australia's borders. In a world facing climate change, biodiversity loss, and increasing social inequality, the Outback's integrated approach to traditional knowledge and modern innovation offers hope. It shows us that sustainability isn't just possible in extreme environments. It might just be the way forward for all of us. What started as a story about a harsh, isolated landscape has become a blueprint for resilience in an uncertain world. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson the Australian Outback has to teach us all. Remember to subscribe for more stories about how ancient wisdom is shaping our modern world. And let me know in the comments, what lessons from the Australian Outback do you think could be applied to challenges in your own region?